Imagine the scene. You, someone who once helped build something great, now see yourself as a shadow of what you once were. Diego, a man who was once a close friend of the owner of one of the most renowned restaurants in the city, walked into Carter's diner with a simple goal: to relive memories and witness the impact he had on the foundation of that business. But upon entering, he wasn't treated as an old friend. He was treated like a complete stranger. That night, he was made to feel invisible, humiliated, and mocked by the very staff of the place, all because of pure indifference and prejudice. But what they didn't know was that he wasn't there alone. His true identity was about to be revealed, and the transformation that would follow would mark a turning point, not just for him, but for everyone involved. Can you imagine the shock when the truth came out and the staff's mask of indifference crumbled? The man who looked like a homeless wanderer in everyone's eyes was, in fact, a crucial part of the restaurant's story. And while contempt spread freely behind the scenes, the restaurant itself was being severely tested. What seemed like a simple case of poor treatment would become an opportunity for a powerful lesson, showing that a person's worth cannot be measured by appearances or by their current situation. In this video, you'll understand how Diego's story in Carter's Diner became an example of redemption, ethics, and a shift in values, and how a simple act of dignity can make all the difference. Stay with me and see how one night of humiliation became the key to the revolution the restaurant so desperately needed. Diego, longtime friend of Michael Carter, the owner of the famous Carter's Diner, had a special reason for visiting the restaurant that day. He wanted, without drawing attention, to see how the place he had once helped finance had grown. Long ago, Diego had been one of the people who pushed the business forward in its early days, but he never sought recognition or status for it. In a gesture of humility, he chose not to reveal who he was and dressed plainly, in worn-out clothes, almost resembling a homeless man. His desire was to be treated like any other customer. No privileges, no weight of his financial past. He just wanted to observe, to see with his own eyes what had become of the place he once helped grow, now a local icon. Upon entering the restaurant, Diego immediately felt the difference in how he was treated. The hostess, upon seeing him walk in, pretended not to notice, as if unaware of a new guest arriving. He waited patiently for someone to assist him, but what followed was an awkward silence. The waiters, instead of greeting him with a friendly smile, chose to ignore him, as if his presence was a nuisance. When someone finally approached to take his order, the service was cold and impersonal, with no attempt to make Diego feel welcome. He sat in a secluded corner, asking for nothing in return, simply observing the interaction with other guests, who, in contrast, were treated with much more care and attention. But what Diego didn't know was that the universe was about to conspire for a major change. He was there, almost like an invisible figure, just another customer, but behind the curtain of daily routine, the winds of history were about to blow with force. As he settled into his seat, a crucial detail went unnoticed by the staff. The restaurant was filled with cameras, capturing every movement. In addition, Michael's daughter, who happened to be there that day, recognized Diego immediately. Instead of intervening, she chose to record on her phone the way he was being treated. Little did Diego know that his simple visit was about to become the spark for a major confrontation that would change the history of Carter's Diner. As Diego settled into his isolated table, something in the atmosphere made him feel out of place. The hostess, with her cold demeanor, barely acknowledged him. She saw him walk in but quickly looked away, as if too focused on her task to bother with someone she deemed unworthy of attention. The restaurant was busy, and the movement of better-dressed customers seemed to be her priority. As Diego passed through the entrance, the hostess moved quicker than usual, completely ignoring his presence. He stood there, unsure whether to insist or wait for someone to acknowledge him. The treatment from the waitstaff was even more distant. When one of them, with a tired expression, finally approached Diego to take his order, the way he treated him felt almost calculated, as if Diego were a nuisance. The waitress barely looked him in the eyes as she took his order with clear disdain. She seemed unwilling to waste time on someone who, in her eyes, clearly didn't fit the profile of Carter's Diner's preferred clientele. Looking around, Diego noticed that all the other customers were being greeted with warm attention, compliments about how they were feeling, even friendly conversations with the staff. But he, for some reason, didn't seem worthy of even a smile. The food he ordered appeared to have been served with the same lack of enthusiasm the waitress displayed. What disturbed Diego the most was the overwhelming feeling of being completely invisible. He felt like a shadow in that restaurant, just another guest who wasn't worthy of the same consideration as the others. Even in a place he had helped build, the atmosphere around him reeked of deep disdain. It was as if he were an outsider in that scene, a presence that, despite being part of the restaurant's history, held no value in the eyes of its staff. The way he was treated was the embodiment of contempt disguised as normalcy. The irony of being treated this way in a place he helped grow did not go unnoticed. This moment wasn't just uncomfortable. It was becoming a bitter lesson about how, sometimes, a person's worth is measured solely by appearance or social status. And that, Diego knew, had the power to transform his entire experience at that restaurant. While Diego waited at his table, the restaurant, seemingly full of life, was in fact wrapped in an invisible layer of disdain. Between sips of his drink, the noise of conversations, and the frantic rhythm of the kitchen, two employees, lacking any sense of tact, began whispering about him, without the slightest concern about hiding the malice in their words. Seated in a corner, Diego could hardly believe what he was hearing. The waiter, Jordan, with a smile laced in irony, made a point of saying out loud, just enough for those nearby to hear, that he seriously doubted someone like Diego could even afford a simple meal. That guy looks like he came to beg for money. I just don't know why he chose such a fancy place to do it, he said mockingly. What should have been a casual backstage comment quickly turned into a spectacle of veiled cruelty. The other employee, more complicit than she should have been, joined in the mockery. With a nervous laugh and eyes gleaming with satisfaction, she added, "People like him only come in to kill the vibe, you know? He doesn't even look like the type who belongs in a place like this." Their exchange was accompanied by low chuckles and knowing glances, as if mocking someone who, at first glance, seemed unremarkable was completely acceptable. Their laughter spread like a silent wave of contempt across the room, but what neither of them realized was that, while they amused themselves with the situation, they were unknowingly sealing the fate of the very restaurant they worked for. Those words and attitudes were more than just a cruel outburst. They were shaping a reflection of an internal culture that would soon prove disastrous for the establishment's future. The cruelest part, however, was the complete disregard for Diego's dignity. The words of Jordan and his coworker weren't just mean. They were the embodiment of a mindset that ignored the intrinsic value of every human being. Diego, though showing no immediate reaction, knew exactly what that kind of behavior meant. He had seen it many times before, prejudice masked as humor, people forced to laugh at others' misfortunes just to feel superior. But he also knew that, although those two employees believed they were in a safe space, speaking in hushed tones, unafraid of consequences, the universe has a strange way of bringing the truth to light. And this time, it would come to the surface in an unexpected and transformative way. The restaurant Diego had once contributed so much to was now revealing a dark side he never anticipated having to confront. As Diego, unaware of the tensions unfolding around him, savored his burger, Michael Carter's daughter, seated at a nearby table, watched the scene closely. She had known Diego since childhood, and seeing him there, in a lonely corner, seemed like a distant memory of the days when he had been one of her father's closest friends, respected and admired. When their eyes met, a jolt ran through her. She had heard about Diego's situation, but seeing him like that, in his current state, being treated with such contempt by her own father's employees, struck her deeply. It was as if a curtain of pain and disappointment had fallen over her perception of that place, something she never imagined could happen inside Carter's diner. However, despite the surprise and the growing indignation swelling in her chest, she didn't act immediately. Instead of going up to Diego and confronting the staff, or intervening directly, she remained where she was, silently observing. Something inside her told her that, at that moment, the wisest choice was to document the situation without anyone knowing she was there. She discreetly took out her phone, disguising the action, and began recording the waiter's conversation and their cruel behavior toward Diego. She knew those images would be powerful and could expose the true nature of the place where her family had built something of great importance. What seemed like a simple lunch was, in fact, becoming a unique opportunity to capture the truth in its rawest form. Although the anger of seeing her childhood friend being treated with such disdain was growing inside her, Michael's daughter knew that acting impulsively was not the best option. She was fully aware that the video she was recording could become the key to a significant change, an opportunity to confront not just the employees, but a culture of disrespect that seemed to be rooted somewhere behind the scenes at Carter's diner. What Diego didn't know was that this small act of patience from Michael's daughter was planting the seed of a great transformation. She knew that soon, the truth would be exposed, and the restaurant would have to deal with the consequences of its unacceptable behavior. So, instead of reacting thoughtlessly, she remained silent, waiting for the right moment to give that episode the meaning it truly deserved. The situation at the restaurant was about to explode in an unexpected way. When Diego tried to pay his bill, hoping only to finish his meal and leave quietly, he was met with a hostile attitude he could never have anticipated. The waiter, with a disdainful expression, looked at him with suspicion and began questioning him harshly. Not only did he ask whether Diego had enough money to pay for the meal, but he also started making aggressive insinuations, suggesting that Diego intended to leave without paying. The waiter's words were not simple questions. They were baseless accusations, laced with sarcasm and judgment. You think you can just come in here and walk out without paying? I bet you don't even have the money for it, he said, glancing around at the other customers as if seeking approval for his mockery. Diego, already tired of being treated with such humiliation, tried to defend himself calmly, without escalating the conflict. He had enough money to pay the bill and no intention of causing any trouble. However, the waiter's insistence on continuing the accusations made the situation even more uncomfortable. The atmosphere around him seemed to freeze, and all eyes began to focus on the unfolding scene. At that moment, Diego felt that no matter how hard he tried to keep his composure, he was being forced into a confrontation he never wanted. He could feel the weight of the words and the stares, as the waiter continued to mock his situation. It was then that the restaurant door opened, and Michael Carter, the owner, walked in. Upon seeing the scene, he immediately understood what was happening and approached with the expression of someone who already knew something was seriously wrong. The impact of Michael's arrival was instant. Upon hearing the accusations directed at his longtime friend, his anger became visible, and he didn't hesitate. His firm and authoritative demeanor immediately took control of the situation. Without mincing words, he demanded that everyone be quiet, and in a loud and clear voice, asked why Diego was being treated that way. The tension in the air became palpable, and all eyes turned to him, surprised by what was unfolding. It was then that Michael, without wasting time, revealed Diego's true identity to everyone present. This man is not just a customer. He was the one who helped finance this restaurant in the beginning, and now he's being treated like garbage. I demand respect now. Michael's revelation left everyone in shock. Those words not only exposed the injustice that was taking place, but also stirred a collective sense of discomfort. The employees who had previously mocked Diego, realizing the gravity of the situation, were visibly embarrassed, and the other customers, who until then had been watching from a distance, were now fully aware that something very wrong was happening inside the restaurant. Michael, with his authority, not only corrected the situation immediately, but also ensured that consequences would be taken against the employees. What should have been a simple meal payment was turning into a game-changing moment that would have significant repercussions for everyone at Carter's Diner. What seemed to be just an isolated incident turned into a decisive moment for Carter's Diner. After Michael revealed Diego's true identity and confronted the staff, the atmosphere in the restaurant changed dramatically. Michael, visibly upset and with a look that made it clear he would tolerate no further disrespect, demanded immediate action. He knew that, as the owner, he had the responsibility to correct any mistake that compromised the restaurant's integrity and the values he held dear. With an authoritative stance, he ordered that the security cameras be accessed immediately. Those cameras, placed in every corner of the restaurant, would now serve as concrete evidence to expose the true behavior of the staff. As everyone waited, the tension in the air was undeniable. Michael, surprisingly calm for such an emotionally charged situation, insisted on displaying the footage on the restaurant screen. The images were crystal clear. There were the employees openly mocking Diego, making cruel jokes about his appearance and insinuating that he couldn't afford his meal. The server's words were all there, recorded with clear audio and no room for misinterpretation. Michael, without hesitation, showed all the customers in the restaurant what was really going on behind the scenes. The footage left no doubt. The respect that had always been fundamental to Carter's Diner's success had been broken, and now he would take drastic action to restore the integrity of the place. At the end of the image presentation, Michael gave no room for empty excuses. He firmly announced that the employees involved would be suspended immediately and that an internal investigation would be launched to determine how such a culture of disrespect had infiltrated the restaurant. The outrage he felt was evident, but what he demonstrated at that moment was an unshakable commitment to ethics. He knew this would be a landmark moment in the history of Carter's Diner, and that this action, though tough, was necessary to restore the image that had been tarnished. When he revealed that the humiliating treatment Diego had received was unacceptable, it became clear to everyone that this was not just an isolated mistake, but a reflection of a deeper issue that needed to be corrected. The reaction was immediate. The customers present, who had been silent until then, began to applaud in support. Some recognized that this was more than just a correction. It was a demonstration of responsibility and respect. That moment of clarity not only transformed the evening, but also set a new standard for the restaurant. Michael's stance was not just a response to a troubling situation, but a reaffirmation of the principles that should have always guided Carter's Diner. Punishing the employees involved was necessary, but the real change that took shape there ran even deeper. The restaurant, which for a moment seemed to have lost its way, now had a chance to reinvent itself. By acting with such resolve, Michael showed that respect for others and integrity were more important than any burger or short-term profit. And that, without a doubt, would make all the difference in the long run. After the intense exposure of the employees' disrespectful behavior, Michael Carter knew that although the images and confrontations had revealed the truth, they were not enough to restore the broken trust in that moment. What was at stake was not just the reputation of his restaurant, but something deeper, the principles of dignity and respect that he had always believed were the foundation of his success. Michael, always pragmatic, knew that words alone would not heal the wound. He needed to take concrete actions that would not only address the immediate mistake, but also ensure that Carter's Diner would never face such a situation again. He didn't want Diego's unfair treatment to be just an isolated incident, but rather a turning point for greater transformation within the restaurant. The first step was to publicly apologize to Diego. Michael, with all the sincerity his heart could convey, acknowledged the mistake made by his team and expressed his regret for how his longtime friend had been treated. He knew that, for the situation to be fully resolved, it wouldn't be enough to simply discipline the employees involved. Diego also needed to genuinely feel that he was an important part of the restaurant. Michael then made a proposal. He invited Diego to become the customer experience consultant, a role that would allow him to help redefine how service would be delivered at Carter's Diner. Michael knew that Diego's experience could bring a valuable perspective on what needed to be done to improve customer relations and make the restaurant environment more welcoming and respectful. In addition to the proposal made to Diego, Michael made the decision to completely restructure the team's training, focusing on core values. It wouldn't be enough to simply teach service techniques or how to keep the restaurant organized. Something much deeper was needed: how to treat every person, regardless of appearance or status, with dignity and respect. He decided to implement continuous training sessions that would address empathy, active listening, and most importantly, ethics in customer service. These training sessions would be held monthly with the participation of all employees, from cooks to waiters, and would aim to create a more inclusive and considerate culture. To reinforce this new approach, Michael implemented the Dignity First policy, which would become the foundation of service at Carter's Diner. It was more than just a rule. It was a life philosophy that everyone would be expected to adopt the moment they stepped through the restaurant's doors. This would be the restaurant's new commitment to its customers, creating a space where everyone felt equally valued, free from discrimination or prejudice. Michael also wanted to ensure that this change would be seen as a genuine and sustainable effort, not just a temporary reaction to a mistake. He established regular team meetings, not only to discuss the restaurant's operational performance, but also to continuously remind everyone of the values that would now guide Carter's Diner. Respect for diversity, embracing people's different stories, and caring for every individual who walked through the door would be the pillars of their new approach. To further strengthen this mindset, Michael began working with Diego on a continuous customer feedback program, allowing customers to evaluate their experience, with this feedback being reviewed periodically. This would not only make employees feel more accountable, but also ensure that Carter's Diner was always evolving to become a more inclusive and empathetic place. With these changes in place, Carter's Diner didn't just correct the serious failure that had occurred. It rose again, stronger, more unified, and more aligned with the values of respect and dignity. What was once a simple burger joint known for the quality of its food now became an example of how, in times of crisis, it's possible to turn a negative situation into an opportunity for learning and growth, not just for those involved, but for the entire surrounding community. By taking these actions, Michael not only restored trust in his restaurant, but gave Carter's Diner a greater purpose: to be a place that, before serving food, serves respect, humanity, and care. What happened that night at Carter's Diner wasn't just about correcting a mistake. It was a profound transformation, a true reinvention of the restaurant's identity. Michael Carter, by acting with such firmness and transparency, not only addressed the immediate issue, but also laid the groundwork for lasting cultural change within the establishment. The restaurant, once known for its delicious food and welcoming atmosphere, now stood as a living example of how businesses can reinvent themselves, learn from their mistakes, and still come out stronger. The impact of Michael's decision echoed in unexpected ways, not only behind the scenes of the restaurant, but also in the community surrounding Carter's Diner. What was once seen as an isolated incident had now become a story of resilience and evolution, an example of how integrity can be restored, even in the most difficult circumstances. When the story of Carter's Diner's transformation began to spread, the restaurant came to be seen in a completely new light. Social media, as expected, played a key role in this process. Customers started sharing their experiences more actively, and the focus was no longer just on the delicious food, but on the genuinely welcoming and respectful atmosphere that was being created. Posts began to multiply, with emotional accounts of how the restaurant had become a place where everyone was treated with dignity, regardless of their appearance or financial situation. The slogan "Dignity First" began to spread beyond the walls of the restaurant, and soon became a reference in the community, with other businesses drawing inspiration from Michael and Diego's approach to improve their own customer service. Moreover, the local community, which had already been an important part of Carter's Diner's success, grew even closer around the restaurant. Many longtime customers, who had frequented the place before the transformation, felt deeply moved by the team's new commitment to respect and empathy. Those changes, which had seemed small at first, began to create a sense of belonging for everyone who walked through the restaurant's doors. Conversations at the tables became more positive, and people started feeling comfortable engaging with the staff in a more personal way, creating a warmer and more welcoming atmosphere. It was as if the restaurant was no longer just a place for a quick meal, but a space where people could find not only good food, but also an environment of respect and understanding. Michael, with Diego's support, also became an active advocate for ethical and inclusive service practices. Together, they began receiving invitations to share the story of Carter's Diner at community events and business conferences, always emphasizing the importance of shifting mindsets and creating environments that respect differences. The two figures became symbols of how a business can not only survive a mistake, but use it as a catalyst for meaningful transformation. In their talks and speeches, Michael and Diego spoke about how respect and dignity are not just moral values, but a fundamental part of any business's long-term success. For them, it wasn't just about improving the customer experience. It was about building a culture where humanity and integrity are the main pillars. The impact of Carter's Diner was so profound that the restaurant began attracting visits from other entrepreneurs who wanted to understand how such a transformation had taken place. Michael and Diego, empowered by the confidence gained throughout the process, started building a consulting network to help other establishments implement their own ethical and cultural changes. Carter's Diner, once just another restaurant in town, was now seen as a beacon of business ethics, a place where business and human values walked hand in hand. Like a story of overcoming adversity, Carter's Diner continued to inspire others, proving that it is indeed possible to start over and thrive, even after the toughest challenges. Now, imagine for a moment that you are Diego, someone who helped build something meaningful, but due to life's circumstances, finds yourself in a vulnerable position. How would you feel if you were treated with contempt and disdain by people who, in truth, should be serving you with the utmost respect? What happened at Carter's Diner wasn't just a behavioral failure. It was a reflection of the depths of humanity and how our actions can impact others in unimaginable ways. The real question here isn't what happened, but what we learned from it. What Michael did, by publicly correcting the injustice and turning that moment into a lesson in humanity and ethics, wasn't just a timely fix. It was a clear example of how true leadership can turn a crisis into an opportunity for meaningful growth. Now, as you reflect on your own life, ask yourself, when was the last time you had the courage to do the right thing, even when it wasn't easy? Michael's stance in correcting and shaping cultural change within his restaurant should serve as a model for all of us, regardless of the field we work in. He didn't just do what was necessary, he went beyond that. He inspired others to reflect on how their own actions affect those around them, creating a cycle of empathy and respect. That's the power of ethical leadership. When we take responsibility and lead with integrity, we can transform entire environments, and the people around us feel empowered to follow that example. And what are you doing to contribute to this change? By watching this story, you now have the power to positively impact your environment. It could be a small gesture, a moment of kindness, or even a bold decision like Michael's. The important thing is knowing that change begins with daily actions, the ones that often seem insignificant but, when added together, create a profound effect on society. If you believe that a fairer, more respectful, and empathetic world is something we should all strive for, then don't miss the chance to be part of this revolution. Subscribe to the channel, turn on notifications, and keep learning how to turn your actions into real impact. The journey doesn't end here. It starts now, with you. How will you use the power of empathy and respect to transform your own world?